Yat A, my relatives. Hello, it's Mark Charles. Today is Friday. I believe it's like the 28th or 29th. What is it now? The 28th, I believe. And actually, let me verify that. Yes, today is Friday, March 28th, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. There's a few things I want to talk with you about today. I want to spend some time discussing the classified security leak by the Trump administration that happened on the web app or the phone app Signal this week. And so I want to have some discussion about that. I also want to preview something I'm going to be talking about next week, which I actually think is much more important than what I'm going to be talking about today. But for those of you who are new here, I start every episode by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from the land of the Piscataway. It's now called Washington, D.C., but the Piscataway, they're the nation, the indigenous nation who were living here and hunting here, farming here, fishing here, raising their families here and burying their dead here long before Columbus got lost at sea. And the Piscataway are still here. I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I just want to state how humbled I am to be living, moving, breathing, existing on these lands today. So, Ahiahat, my Piscataway relatives. So before we jump into the security leak, let me see who's online with me. I know we have a few people here. Steve, Yate, good to have you here. Thanks for joining. Actually, for me, it's no longer it's no longer morning, but it's early afternoon here, and I'm very much still enjoying my cup of coffee, and I'm glad that you could be here. I know there's other people online, so I can't have my relatives. Thanks for joining me today. Last week I was Charlotte. Yeah, hey, thanks for joining. Good to have you here. Thank you for being here, and glad that you and Steve and others could be on with me this morning. Last week I did a podcast with Native News Online for their podcast in Native Badaski, and it's kind of a regular podcast. They put it up on Native News Online. Levi Rickert and I have been knowing each other for a long time, going back all the way to about 2002 or 2003, or maybe not quite that long, maybe 2010. We've known each other for at least 10 years, I believe, 10 or 15 years now. But he has been doing tremendous work at Native News Online to get the stories from Indian country out into the rest of the world. And he hosts a podcast, and he and I could talk for hours, but he invites me on every now and then to join him with a conversation. And we talked last week about some of the expansionist language used by the Trump administration, and that podcast went really well. It's on their YouTube channel. They posted about a week ago, and I'm going to share it here if you would like to watch that. Again, Levi and I know each other well. We had a great conversation, and it was fun to have a discussion with him about some of the language and the rhetoric and the activity the Trump administration is taking regarding expansionism and trying to, with discussions about Greenland, discussions about Gaza, discussions about Panama, and even about Canada. So yeah, if you have a chance, I encourage you to take a look at that. You'll notice I'm in a bit different of a studio space today. I've been playing with my studio here at my office and trying a few different things. So right now I have this screen behind me where I can change the images fairly easily. I'm looking for something a bit more casual, but not as much like I'm sitting in a news studio. So I'm going to try a few different settings here, and we'll see how it works out. But I wanted to talk to you about the story that's been dominating much of the news this past week, and that is how the editor of The Atlantic was added to a secure web app chat group hosted by members of Trump's military leadership and his cabinet, where they were discussing plans for attacks on some terrorist groups around the world. And if you haven't read that story yet, I'm going to give you a lot of articles that you can read. And I encourage you to take a look at least a few of them. This was published by NBC News today. I'm giving you this one first because this article is about the Atlantic, that they finally published the full signal chat. They did redact the name of the one intelligence officer who is still on active duty because it is against government protocol, at least it used to be, to give out the names of active agents in the CIA. And so they did redact that for the story, but that's the only thing that was redacted. And NBC News wrote an article about it, which I encourage you to read. It'll give you some idea of what's going on. I'm also going to share two articles actually published by The Atlantic. And The Atlantic is a subscription-based news magazine that you can actually get a 30-day subscription for. I'm not promoting it, but it's the one place where you can actually read the story by the organization that was involved in the story. And so, yeah, if you want, you can sign up for a free 30-day plan, our trial, if you want to at least read the story. Maybe they give you a free story. I might have used my free story for the month. I'm not sure, but I did sign up for the trial so I could get the free story. I have subscribed to it in the past, and so. But I'm putting this one up here. This story is titled "The Trump Administration Accidentally Texted Me Its War Plans," and that is a very interesting story that I read this morning. And then this is the second story that was published. And this is one, I think it came out just yesterday or today. This is the actual text stream that was put out by on Signal. And both of those are on The Atlantic. So I actually encourage you to read those if you're able to. Because they're by the organization that was included in this chat message, and so you're getting a very firsthand account of what was shared, and even how bewildered they were that the editor was actually included in this chat group. And so, yeah, I encourage you to take a look at that. I think that, and you've been hearing everyone screaming about the chat, and you've been hearing all the back and forth and how the Democrats are appalled that the Republicans could treat classified information and top secret information in our active war plans so flippantly to actually use a publicly available web app. They, of course, many experts have been interviewed about how this should never happen, and this type of information is only discussed within the most secure environment, where almost every precaution, nearly every precaution, is made to make sure the messages are not intercepted because it could put our service members at risk. And so there's the Democrats are actually, jumping up and down, demanding that we look into this and find out what needs to happen because of this. And there's another interesting thing about this chat. This is Signal, which it's basically an encrypted text messaging app, and it's more secure. And one of the features of Signal is that you can set your text to expire, so they delete after a certain amount of time, which is just another security feature. Now, the interesting thing about that, and this is pointed out in the article in The Atlantic, I'm just going to read this paragraph to you. It says there was another potential problem. Walt, who is the person who invited The Atlantic into this chat group, set some of the messages in the Signal group to disappear after 1 week and some after 4. This raises questions about whether the officials may have violated federal record laws. Text messages about official acts are considered records that should be preserved. And so I'm going to share this story with you, where a judge in this case is now requiring the government to preserve the Signal message apps or messages that they're using on Signal. And again, some of these messages may have already been deleted, so they may have already violated the rule, the law that requires them to do that. And so, right, anyway, the point of all of this is the Democrats are jumping up and down saying, how dare the Republicans do this? This is a very flippant use of put our service members at risk, and it's a flippant use of publicly available app to talk about classified and top secret information, and it's appalling that they would do something like this. And the Republicans are downplaying it, saying, well, this is not, nothing secure was addressed, and this is not the kind of thing that actually needed that much security around it. And Trump was online yesterday talking about how this is a witch hunt of his administration and all these things. But remember back a decade ago, right, when Hillary Clinton was serving as our nation's Secretary of State, and she was on President Obama's cabinet, and she set up a private email server in her home, which she said was used to send and receive unclassified emails, but some emails marked classified were sent to that email address and used on that server. And 10 years ago, it was the Republicans jumping up and down saying, how dare you do something like this? This is horrible, and you're not treating our service members with the respect they deserve. And right, this is what got Trump yelling, lock her up. And this is where, and the Democrats at that point were saying, this is not such a big deal. This is not actually that bad. And they came out supporting Hillary Clinton. And so I'm going to share with you this article that I found in USA Today. And in this article, the USA Today reporter actually went back and found the Trump teams who were on the Signal app sharing classified information. What was their response 9 or 10 years ago when Hillary Clinton did something just as insecure? And then this is an article, this is actually a 10-year-old article that came out in like 2015, 2016 on the LA Times. And this is regarding the Democrats who were then defending Hillary Clinton and saying what she did wasn't so bad, and this is actually not that big of a deal, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, we had the op-ed written by Hillary Clinton just a few days ago in response to this Signal app, where she is again pointing out how dangerous and just plain dumb it is that the Republicans did something like this. And she was the one who did something probably just as dangerous and just as dumb a decade ago. The point of all this is there's no integrity here. I actually don't believe either side really cares about the safety and security of our troops. That's not what is first and foremost in their minds. They're not concerned about the laws of this country and what laws have been set up and how top secret and classified information is supposed to be used. This is merely something they can use to bash their opponents' heads when they do something dumb and stupid. But then when they do something, the other side does something just as dumb and just as stupid. Oh, it's not that bad. This isn't a big deal, and we're not doing it. And I encourage you to go back and look at the story I shared. Which one is that? Oh, I'm actually going to share it with you. So I'm going to give you two more stories here. This is the AP News, again, where Trump, who was saying Hillary should be locked up because of what she did, is now saying this is a witch hunt, what his own cabinet has done, and there might even be something defective about the app. And this obviously is not a very big deal, and nothing discussed was classified, and even blaming our attacking the the Atlantic editor who was added to the group. And so I'm going to share this story, and this is an NPR story. And in this story, it actually talks about what happens when non-elected, not as powerful people make these kind of mistakes. And not even with events that are happening in real time, but with events that have happened months, maybe even years prior. And when they accidentally, when just a regular enlisted person or someone who's just serving the government does something like this, and they are almost immediately fired or removed from their position, and their clearance is cut, and sometimes they're even brought up on charges. And right, this is of course what happens when someone who is not a key player in one of the two parties does something like this. And so I just lay out a question to Hillary and to Trump, to Democrats and to Republicans. Who, if you could just clarify for the American people and for our service members, who is actually required to keep classified and top secret information secure? Because very clearly, not everybody is. Hillary Clinton was never lost her job or brought up on charges for what she did. I doubt anything's going to happen to the people who did this in this chat group. And even if something is brought up, Trump will probably just pardon them. He's downplaying the whole episode. So I'd like to know, Democrats and Republicans, who's actually required to do this? Who is actually required to be concerned about the safety of our service members who are putting themselves in harm's way? Who is actually required to follow the laws our country has established for the treatment and the security of classified and top secret information? I'm just curious, who's actually required to do this? Unfortunately, I don't have a senator I can call because no one represents me in the District of Columbia. But it's a question I have, so I just lay it out there to the public. And yeah, who's required to actually keep these laws? And if there is such a requirement, can we please begin to apply it equally to everyone who has access to this type of information? Again, both Trump and Biden were found to have taken classified information from the White House to their homes after they left office. Neither one of them were punished. So this is a very serious question. I'm legitimately curious. Who is actually required to obey these laws? Feel free to get back to me, Trump or Hillary, Democrats or Republicans, Musk. I don't know if I want to hear from Musk. You're not actually a government official. So yeah, I don't want your opinion, Musk. But anyone in the Trump administration who actually was appointed and approved by the people of this country, not someone who just bought their way into the administration, which is what Musk did. I don't care about his opinion right now. But anyone else, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, of who is actually accountable and required to keep our laws regarding top secret information. So anyway, that's my thoughts and questions. And I don't know the answer, right? I really don't know the answer. And this is the challenge, because there are so many issues like this that when you actually get down to it, both the Democrats and the Republicans seem to agree, right? They both seem to agree classified information is not that important when it's our people mishandling it. It's only important when it's our opponents who are mishandling it, right? Both Trump and Biden clearly stated they do not trust our judicial system to treat their supporters, their colleagues, their administration, and even themselves and their families fairly. Very clearly, neither Trump nor Biden trust our judicial system. And this is apparent in the way that they passed out pardons to people who support them and who are close to them and dear to them, whether it's family members or people who actually support them. So both sides agree our judicial system cannot be trusted. It is weaponized. No one wants to fix it. They just want to use their powers to protect it. And so this is what's so baffling about all of the screaming that's going on right now. And this is what is most dangerous about this moment we're in, is the Democrats and Republicans are literally just hitting each other over the head over the same issues. And they're only flipping sides when it's their opponent that's doing the incorrect thing. But they don't hold their own side accountable when they do the same incorrect thing. And this is just the beginning of what's really, really broken about our political system. We have this very simplistic, almost childlike binary two-party system that is not first and foremost interested in justice or equity or diversity, right? Yes, right now the Trump administration is attacking those things very clearly and doing everything they can to dismantle anything with diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the Democrats have never used their time in power to actually remove these values that are embedded in the foundations of our country, right? We still have a constitution that keeps slavery legal in our prison system. We still have a 3/5 compromise. We still have 51 gender-specific male pronouns littered throughout our Constitution. We still point to a Declaration of Independence that refers to natives as merciless Indian savages. And we still nominate and even appoint judges who believe in originalism, which is that we should interpret the Constitution in the spirit and the ideas in which it was written, which was rooted in racism, sexism, and white supremacy. And so both parties share these values. One is more comfortable saying them out loud. The Democrats are a bit more embarrassed to say these things out loud, but they don't clearly disagree, which is why there's such chaos in the Democratic Party right now. They don't know what to do because some of them are actually maybe, right? Yeah, the Trump administration says these things out loud, but they don't necessarily disagree with what's going on. And so this is where we have to be very careful. And we have to make sure that even when we see, and I will argue that this issue, the security issue, is important, right? We do need to treat our classified information as important. We do need to keep the safety and security of our service members at the forefront of our minds. As a nation, if we are asking people from our citizens to fight wars on our behalf, we have to be doing everything we can to keep them as safe and secure as possible. But I promise you that is not what is motivating the screaming right now between the Democrats and the Republicans. And if you don't believe me, go back and read the articles from 10 years ago when the shoe was on the other foot. And they were all saying the very same thing their opponents are now saying today. These two sides do not care. They are simply working to fight each other. That's their primary objective, not the safety and security of our nation or of our service members. So, what does deserve more of our time? What types of things should we be talking about? Well, I want to preview my show for next week. I don't want to talk about this immediately right now because I literally just saw the article last night. And It's an executive order that Trump, I think, just issued yesterday, where he gave an executive order on the Smithsonian where he targets funding for programs with improper ideology, and he specifically mentions the African American Museum and a future women's museum. Now, this is very important because this is about erasing our nation's history. This is about the adage of the victors get to write the history. And this is where we now have a white male, J.D. Vance, who was put in charge of this order, who will be going through the Smithsonian to decide what is and what is not an improper ideology. And I can pretty much guarantee you his definition of improper and the African American community's definition of improper is not going to be the same, as well as his definition of improper, as well as women's definition of improper, is not going to be the same. And these are the kind of things that are crucially important, because now this is where our government is going to begin actively trying to erase some of our history. And this is where we, as especially people from the margins, need to be working very hard to make sure not only our leaders are informed of what they're doing, but the world is informed about what our nation is doing. And this is where we need to be very active in resisting and in challenging these sorts of things. And I'm going to talk about this on my second cup of coffee next week. I have some things in motion that I'm beginning working on, things I'm going to be talking about in my travels in the upcoming months, and some projects I'm putting into place. But this is a very important, right? This is where I talk about the need for common memory. The quote I quote so often, used by George Erasmus, that says, where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. If you want to build community, you must start by creating common memory. And I am, based on the track record of the Trump administration, based on the rhetoric and track record of J.D. Vance, I am quite certain what they want to do and what they define as an improper ideology is not about creating an accurate common memory. It's about letting the victors, the white landowning male, continue to promote and write their own version of history. And so I will be talking more about that. But anyway, my relatives, I'm glad you could join me. Thanks for taking some time to share a cup of coffee with me. Let me look through the comments and see who's on here. Yes, Charlotte, you are absolutely correct. Nazi Germany tried to erase their history as well. Right? This is what these types of nations do. You erase your history. And this is right. We are very much actively going down a road that our nation and our leaders would be appalled if we saw other of our allies going down these same roads. But when we're going down it, our leaders are like, no, this is the right road to be on. And so we need to not only be very good students of history, but we have to be very aware of what we're doing and of what's happening and what is this moment that we're living in. And what is the best way that we can resist and stand up in these moments in the most effective way possible. And that's what we need to be talking about a whole lot more. So my relatives, if you are interested in going deeper into dialogue on some of these discussions, I invite you to join my Patreon. Patreon is a subscription-based kind of like social media site. I post there fairly regularly. It's where I go more in depth into a lot of these conversations. I have a monthly Q&A on Zoom, on my Patreon, on the Ask Questions tier. It is one of the best ways to help keep my voice independent. I work very hard not to monetize my other social media, my YouTube channel, or my other social media, because I don't want to give advertisers any sway in what I do or do not talk about. But if you like my voice and the independence I'm trying to have here, Patreon is one of the best ways to help keep my voice independent. And of course, Unsettling Truths, the book I co-authored with Sing-Chan Ra regarding the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery. That book is still available for purchase, and I still am running what I call my book study special, where if you buy 10 signed copies of my book from my website, and you use it for a book study with your group, I will give your group a 45-minute virtual Q&A. At some point, you can schedule it with me through my assistant. And I just did one of these a few days ago. I do them several times a month. I really enjoy these conversations. These conversations make me so happy because people have read the book, they've discussed it amongst each other, they have some really good questions, and it brings out some really excellent dialogue. And so those book study Q&As that I do a few times a month are some of the best conversations I get to have each month. The Q&A on my Patreon is also really good too. Those are growing in popularity, and I really enjoy those discussions. We just had one last week Sunday. We usually have one once a month on my Patreon for the Ask Questions tier and above. But my relatives, I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for taking a few minutes to join me for my second cup of coffee. I hope you have a great weekend. It is a beautiful spring weekend here in Washington, D.C. The cherry blossoms around the tidal basin are in full bloom. There's a kite festival going on. The city is chaotic, but spring in Washington, D.C. is absolutely beautiful. And I'm very excited for the beauty that is blossoming all around me as I walk around the city and see the flowers blooming and the grass growing and the trees blossoming and everything else. So my relatives, walk in beauty, and may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Ashahat and Hakonet.